All right, good afternoon, everybody out there on the internet, watching on the Facebook feed. If you're new to our interview series, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Today we have a very special treat. We have as our guest the wonderful composer and pianist and vocalist Darrius Willrich. If you know about Darrius, you already know that he's great. If you don't, on the intro to this video, it has a bit of his bio, and you can see all the wonderful artists that he works with, past, present, and future. And some of his accomplishments. So, Darrius, thank you for joining us. Glad you're here.
My pleasure. Great to be here.
Yeah, well, I've known you for a long time, just periphery from around the music scene and mutual friends. But many people out there do not. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got started in life as a musician? What got you started playing?
Well, this got me started was playing with, hanging out with musician friends, actually neighborhood friends that turned out to be musician. One person in particular who used to play in church and was a multi-instrumentalist, and he, basically played a song by Lionel Richie on the piano, and I was like, oh my God, I have to learn that, and that started the madness.
Did you grow up in Seattle? You currently live in Seattle.
Yeah,
Are you from Seattle?
Yeah, I'm from Seattle. Yeah, I've lived in Seattle since I was 8, so yeah.
But prior to that, where were you?
In Wichita, Kansas.
Okay, so much of a music scene there that you can recall, or interest in music? Or?
I mean, I was 8, so I don't know. I was barely. I mean, it was an interest. It's an interesting thing that I would turn out to be a musician because my grandma played piano a little bit in the church. There was always a piano in the house, but I never really got the bug to play until around 12. Yeah, something that was for me, and I mean. And it was kind of strict too, because we grew up in a very, very ultra Christian. Like it wasn't until I moved here here when I was 8 that I was hearing non-gospel music, what Christians call secular music. Yeah, so yeah, pretty interesting that I would turn out to be a musician with that. It's like that's interesting. No one, yeah, that's interesting to look back on that there was a piano always in the house, but. Wasn't until 12.
Did you plunk out melodies at all, or you didn't even touch it?
I mean, I touched it, but it was more as a toy, not like me really making music. It was just in the house, and I'm a kid,
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. We had similar in our house. We had a piano, and I didn't really have any. I had no formal piano education until college, but I would just sit down and just play little things, melodies for fun.
Yeah.
Not like, oh, we need to go practice now.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so 8 years old, you had a friend that was playing in church. You said, correct?
Yeah, this was closer to 12. Yeah, when I was definitely in Seattle. So, yeah, that he had a history of he had played in church. I don't think he was doing it current at the time. We were just hanging out. I remember it being a summer, and yeah, we would dance outside a lot. We liked music, but it would being introduced to playing was a whole other thing. Yeah.
So what were some of the, in terms of music, what did you enjoy listening to? Can you remember some of this first stuff you enjoyed?
Some of the first stuff I enjoyed was Kool and the Gang, and I enjoyed the gospel music, like Andre Crouch and James Cleveland, and I really enjoyed that music, but it was just I didn't have exposure to much else until 17, when I was 8. So, I definitely liked Parliament. I mean, I liked Parliament so much it was I thought I was going to get in trouble listening to it. Yeah, I've told the story before, but I was spending the night at my 2 aunties' house, and they left probably to get something at the store, and I was left at home alone and got into their record collection and found oh my God, of course I have to put on the picture of the guy in jumping out of a spaceship. So that was Parliament. And it was so good. I was having such a good time. I just, it was almost too good. And I turned the record off and pretended like I had never woken up so I wouldn't get in trouble. That's hilarious. That cracks me up. So yeah, Parliament, Kool and the Gang. Who else was I really love? I mean, I loved whatever was kind of pop and very melodic and pretty. I remember liking George Benson, and I can't remember the guy. Right in my head is "I Love a Rainy Night." I remember that song as a kid, loving that song. I like James Taylor. Remember some of the stuff. Yeah, so pretty wide coming in to a new, like non-gospel music. Pretty wide range looking back.
So at that time, growing up in Seattle, what middle school did you go to?
I went to McClure Middle School.
And did they have a music program or anything to speak of at the time?
I think they did, but I wasn't into it like that yet. Where I was like lessons, and I was just knew that I dug it and had learned how to play a couple songs I like. Like, of course, I was into Stevie Wonder and yeah.
So if I understand you correctly, you're saying that you just did music for fun.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It wasn't something that was pushed in the household. It was like kind of something that I was discovering that I was being drawn to. Yeah.
Well, so when you started to have an interest in music or display an interest in music, was your family supportive of it and tried to encourage and get lessons and that kind of stuff? Or?
Yes. I mean, it's just hard. It's so hard to tell with teenagers. So I get, at first how it, more just kind of watching what's he gonna do, So, but I kept the interest from 12 to about 15, and then when I was 15, I was visiting my uncle, who's a preacher in Minneapolis, and I don't know how he knew, but he gave me this little keyboard. It was the first instrument I ever had. He said, "Oh, you look like you have a musical ear," and that was the beginning of the whole. Okay, I have an instrument now, so. I learned the names of the notes because they were written at the left end, and I mean I just never looked back after that. And my mom was like, "Well, if you stick with this little tiny keyboard for a year, I'll buy you a piano." And there it was.
That's a huge
yeah,
huge deal.
Yeah.
Well, so I'm assuming at some point you got the piano because here we are having this conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So. At any point, so you were at McClure Middle School. So at what point did school and school music programs ever factor in prior to college for you?
Nope, never really. I mean, not anything where no. I took lessons at like a local. I lived in Renton at the time when I got my instrument, and I took lessons at what was then Evans Music out by South Center. A lady named Polly Reagan was my teacher, who was trying to learn how to read and just kind of get acclimated to. I knew I wanted, for some reason, I did know wanted to, at least if I was going to study, wanted to study jazz. I mean, I was just drawn to that kind of music, like in Stevie Wonder and even gospel music. So, yeah, that went on for like a year or two, but I was a teenager, so it was kind of like I was practicing and I liked it, but I wasn't serious yet, and I would not practice. And then the repercussions of that. And then I was like, oh, well, I'm wasting this lady's time, and then I stopped. And that was the moment, like when I stopped taking the lessons and realized that, well, this is something I really, really want in my life. Okay. So next time I get a teacher, I'm not going to mess this up, So, yeah, it was the stopping that really made me realize, oh, this is something that really wants to be very important to me. So once I did that, I started taking with a jazz instructor, Bogi Vuyakov at I think that's it. Is it Sherman Clay downtown? And then shortly after that, I went to Cornish College of the Arts. Yeah.
There's for people watching at home or the three people in our live studio audience. There's a wonderful documentary interview that came out, I believe, early July. I think it's SCCTV, and it's on Darrius, and it's very informative and great, and I highly encourage you to watch that, too, to get more about, because I'll do what I can in this hour, but it always goes fast in, like, several different directions. But check it out. It's great. And you do mention Cornish in that video, which I had no idea that you went there. I graduated from Cornish in 2002, so what time frame were you there?
So, yeah, I was there from, like, 91 to 94. Yeah.
So, all right. What made you? When I was growing up, I grew up in Tacoma. I didn't know anything about Cornish. I had no clue, and just on like a chance, I heard about it from a couple different musicians, and then I knew, oh wow, this is a great school. I had no idea. How did you come to know about Cornish as a music school?
Yeah, I was just looking because at the time, when I was really practicing a lot, I was actually going to Seattle University, studying accounting and humanities. Oddly enough, and just talking with my jazz instructor, that Cornish, something local would be good. I was looking all over the place, but given that I was such a late starter, I really didn't start till 12 or 15. Like I didn't start like 3 or 5 or 8 even. that was a good speed for me to to it was actually the perfect thing to do. And I guess just asking what was around locally was from my jazz instructor at the time.
Well, so before we dive into corners, because I have lots of questions for you about, because that's
Cool.
before my time there. So you're learning how to play, you're learning how to read, you're getting some lessons. Are there any outlets? I mean, I know there were at that time in Seattle places to play. Were you playing with other musicians and getting out and doing some gigs?
No, zero, nothing. It was just all in the house. Yeah, really just scales and, as you know, starting to learn songs and voicings and just playing by myself. It was really the first time I ever played with other people was when I enrolled at Cornish. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, again, prior to Cornish, you're listening to pop music, stuff of the day, gospel, stuff you're working on in lessons. In terms of like jazz, any like, and that's a broad term, particularly in 2020. Sure. Were there any straight ahead guys that really like drew your attention? You know, it was a world that I really didn't know much about. I just knew I liked the harmonies, and you know, most of what I learned about jazz, I started learning while at Cornish, and I kind of became a purist. I started collecting the records and really dove into that, and really loved it. I was pretty single focused. I mean, it was. Yes, I look back and be like, I was kind of a snob for a while, like a jazz snob for a minute, but that did facilitate me learning it. You know, that completely. I think that's funny you mentioned that. I remember when I grew up in the household, my father's from the Middle East, so it's a lot of Middle Eastern music, and my mom's from the Midwest. So we didn't listen to pop music. She knew like weird show tunes and things, and from there I just naturally started gravitating towards hip hop. You know, I loved rap and hip hop, and then I started playing in band, and then got into the jazz thing, and then it was like, oh, jazz is the only thing. You know, you kind of go through that. I think as a jazz musician, that kind of jazz elitist kind of maybe not so much these days because there's people are teaching it better. Like that's maybe not a good thing, but maybe something that you kind of have to go through to really get in and get that information and sit with it for a while. Yes, yes, I think so. When you're learning a new language, which is what it was like, you do have to sort of immerse yourself and kind of push things to the side so that you can really grasp it and really let it in. You know, and it's a period. I don't think it's, you know, like you said, I don't think it's a good thing to just stay that way. But like while you're learning, I mean, and especially if you're surrounded by a jazz school and other people, it like lends itself to just like, well, let's just really, this is this part of my life to just really just dive in and kind of be exclusive. But yeah, it can run away with you. It ran away with me a little bit, and I realized I wasn't listening to other music. That's when I was like, okay, it's time to like, I think I got a little bit of handle, and I'm doing shows, and I'm being a jazz pianist, like, but now I'm interested in the things that I cannot do. Yeah. I should add, and this is my mistake on the front part of this, talking about Darrius and his achievements in the music world. He's also a very fine instructor and teaches for Seattle Jazz Ed, and he does private lessons. And any other associations you're working with? Yeah, I work with Off the Wall Music and the Seattle Drum School. And if people are interested in getting together with you with some lessons and insight, how can they get in touch with you? Well, they can, if they like those organizations, they can contact Jazz Ed or Jazz Ed, Off the Wall Music, and what was the third one? Seattle Drum School. If you have affiliations with them, those are fine places. I have fun working with those people, and I can be emailed or called directly as well. And you have a website, I'm assuming, that people can get that from? Yeah, or even Facebook, or if they don't have, because my website right now is actually dedicated to an online course that I've created. So, not like a place to contact me to get private lessons so much. What spurred this whole thing is listening to your answers about being in a jazz. It seems like it's come from a point of having taught people music. That's an insightful kind of statement that usually teachers, when you're teaching other people, you kind of realize, oh yeah, these are some things. There's some self-reflection that goes into that. There is some self-reflection, but there's a lot to say. There's a lot to say about teaching. Like that's a big kind of pool to jump in, because what comes to mind when I start to think about teaching is how, in the beginning, it was like I was impatient in the beginning. Impatient with students, and I was definitely giving them
the goods, but definitely more impatient. And I was young, I was a kid, so these are things you get when you get older. Just and how to keep it fun. That's what just keep it fun. It's not something stressful. I think I was stressed learning music, realizing that I started late. I felt like I was such a late starter, and felt like I was always trying to catch up. So that impatience got past in some of my first students. So my apologies to those people. I mean, they learned some stuff, but still, I like a complete 180. Now.
Well, we were talking earlier, and I was telling you, I started teaching lessons in 1996, 1997, and if I remember back to how I was as a teacher, at least my memories of what I was like as a teacher versus now, I mean, I think just like as a musician and you're playing and you're composing, your teaching style and your ability to connect with people and different types of personalities changes, and you're available to assess and realize what works for you and other personalities. Would you agree?
Absolutely. That is also, so, and that's, given that I have a kind of a program or something that I realized that I was showing my students over and over again that turned into a book, that turned into a course, you do have to be sensitive to that. Okay, maybe there's a way that I have learned and that I think that this is a pathway, but that people have different strengths and weaknesses and different tendencies and different things that will help them, and you definitely need to be sensitive and work with that. I've learned that being on both sides, actually. Yeah.
All right. Well, now I want to get into Cornish. So when you were at Cornish, I mean, like I said, I had no idea about the school, and then I started seeing who was on the faculty and all that they had done with music in their lives. So when I went there, it was Hadley Callman, Julian Priester, Randy Halberstadt, Dave Peck, Margie Pose, Jovino Santos Neto, Chuck Deerdorf, Jim Knapp. I'm probably forgetting somebody. Anyways, who was around when you were there?
A lot of those same people. In fact, Jovino hadn't started teaching there when he kind of appeared out of nowhere and began to play, and people were like, I think he was going to study composition there, and so even like Randy Halberstadt was like, I don't know who's going to teach that guy. Am I supposed to teach that guy? Yeah. So, but a lot of those same people were around. Julian and Hadley and Jim Knapp and Chuck Deerdorf, they were there. Absolutely. It's a lot of the same people. Yeah.
So for me, looking back, a couple of the most beneficial things that I got out of school, one was Randy's piano class, because I came in knowing how to play the saxophone and how to improvise. But actually having some tools to get in and play piano, not only for understanding how to get through tunes, but also for composing, was huge, and I use that a lot, not only today to teach, but also for my own writing and development. You're coming in as a piano player, so I don't know if that was as profound for you, but other things that they had, which I guess they don't have anymore, was rep class. Did they have that when you were there?
They did. And, I remember Jim Knapp taught that class for me, for us, and that was very helpful to kind of be pointed or steered in the directions, especially like someone from his perspective saying what might be important to look at. I definitely was the ways that he was seeing was very helpful for me to see how it differed from what I would think. It would be really great to have those different opinions, so you could look in places that you might not have ever looked. So, wow.
Okay, so from your time while you were there, looking back, what do you think were some things that were very formative and beneficial to help you grow as a musician, aside from what you just mentioned? How organized Randy Halberstadt is. Very organized in his lesson teaching and very prepared. And and also the straight talk of Hadley Callman, very, very straight. Just so straight and almost shocking straight. Like especially when you're a kid, you don't get. You may think that he's trying to hurt your feelings, but he's effective. I mean, like I've told this story too. I just will never forget. We were playing the song. I don't remember the song, but it was like we were jamming out. It was awesome. It was having a good time. And Hadley stops the band. Everyone stop. Everyone stop. Everyone stop. Then he comes and sits next to me. And
he says, "So Darrius, so what is it about this section of the keyboard that fascinates you so much?" Like in front of everyone. Like, and I was embarrassed, but I never, I mean, it literally fixed the problem immediately. You know, I never comped in the area where the saxophonist will be playing. Comping too high, that ceased to be a habit in that moment. So it helped. You know, maybe my ego was bruised, but I'm there to learn music, and that was immediately effective at getting me to stop that. So, and yeah, he was one of those people that could pull that off. And Julian was very instrumental as far as like encouraging you to learn songs, or encouraging in a way, because his tests were by ear because he has perfect pitch. So he would just bring a recorder to class. So it was almost more of a terror factor about having completely learned, because if you messed up a little, he was going to hear that. Like, unlike some teachers who don't have perfect pitch, they may need to watch you and see, you know, like, and maybe, of course, we could hear it, but what still was like that for me at that time, it was a good motivator. It was a great motivator.
Well, the other cool thing was just watching the faculty, for me, watching the faculty members play or the guest artists they bring in, and everything that they said, I mean, they would demonstrate, and that was cool to have instructors that could actually, you know, practice what they preach, you know.
Absolutely.
I saw a dialogue the other day. It was between Chuck Deerdorf and Nate Omdahl. They were talking about, Nate was basically saying how much he enjoyed Hadley as a teacher, and Chuck was saying, yeah, I don't know if his teaching style would necessarily fly in today's world. And there's probably a grain of truth with that, which is good and bad, you know, because everyone that I talked to that knew Hadley from the perspective of having him as an instructor, you know, loved him dearly and gained so much from that education that they got from him. So, anyways.
But I can totally get, because there are, you know, like I said, my situation, I'm sure people in the room looked at me and maybe felt sorry for me that I was being kind of embarrassed, but like, you know, in the long run, it was so effective. And I would do the same thing, because he was very a stickler with the rhythm section players. You know, I mean, I definitely watched him in the middle of performances, people performing on stage, go up on stage, take the sticks out of the drummer's hand and play the cymbal how it should be. Like, whoa, yeah, people will get mad, but you know, you're there to learn how to do that. And he's like, I'm not going to let this slide. Let's this like this, you know. So,
yeah, wonderful. Okay, so while you're at Cornish, now you're getting instruction from people that basically helped invent the music, you know, and did a lot of playing, you know. Once you became more aware of recordings and different voices within the spectrum of jazz, we'll use that term loosely, were there any piano players that you started gravitating towards their style or approach when you were kind of getting into it?
Yeah, I definitely had eras, you know, like, you know, definitely fell in love with Oscar Peterson early on, Phineas Newborn Jr., like they're really cats that are really very proficient in as far as like sparkling technique and time.
I'm happy to hear you say that, because a lot of people don't talk about Phineas. And I've heard him finest. I've pronounced lots of different ways.
Exactly. I've heard it so many other ways. Yes.
It's like a musician's musician, super profound, and only people that are kind of getting into music quite a bit ever really hear about him, which is a shame, because he was a monster.
He was a monster, yes. I mean, he's basically our version of, you know, the U.S.'s version of Oscar Peterson, because Oscar Peterson was really from Canada, but still. Yeah, quite a juggernaut, especially it is, I just find it interesting in general with music. This is almost a whole other conversation, but like the things that you have to search for rather than the things that are hitting you over the head, like things that are being thrown at you that are out there that everyone knows about, and the depth and the quality, or I don't just like someone like Phineas is like kind of astounding, like that. Why would you have to search for something like that? It's so good.
Well, I guess part of that you can break down and blame it on there's music as art, and then there's music as a business, you know. And
Very
that's
true.
Unfortunately, you know, something that we all have to navigate.
Indeed.
Which sucks, because it ruins a lot of cool things, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Like I was mentioning to you before we even started, most of the gigging that I do is usually bass, drums, and saxophone, and it's not because I don't like piano or guitar. I love it, but it's just economics. A lot of times I just can't afford to do it.
Absolutely.
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 Okay, so I have to ask, it's a guilty question for me. Growing up, I had a cassette single in middle school of Digable Planets, Cool Like That. And I know that you work with them and tour with them. And so what's your association with them, and how did you get involved to work with them?
Well, I mean, Ishmael Butler is from Seattle. He created Digable Planets, and friends of mine were already associated with the touring band in the late 90s and early 2000s. People that I was playing with in town when they were here a lot. You know, people Thaddeus Turner, Gerald Turner, Larry Sims, whose nickname is Bubba, who's also an engineer. So that band ran for a while, and then they stopped for whatever reason. It's kind of like they were calling it quits. So I happened to just be at Thad's house one day, probably for a whole other rehearsal, and he's like, well, you want me to put your name in the hat for the reunion band? I'm like, I mean, literally, like, what kind of question is that? Of course. Like, are you serious? Yeah, so that's really how, I mean, and literally, he asked me that, and like 15 days later, we had a show. So that was the first show in late 2015. And so I've been.
Well, it seems like, I mean, just watching, we're Facebook friends and seeing your posts and things, the band is still quite, well, not right now, but it's prior to COVID, quite busy.
Very active. I mean, we'd love to be more active, but, very, very active. We would have our rehearsals weekly and stay on top of the material and develop it rather organically. That's what I totally love about how we're a lot of times playing a lot of the same material, but we allow it to change over time, given what we're used to doing and what we're maybe tired of, and all this, the small changes that filter in over the years. It's very organic. I really dig that about that band, and how it's not like, oh, we need to change this song because I'm getting bored and let's do it this way. And it's like kind of what it kind of changes on its own. When we need to make changes, we do, but like that's not like the focus so much, or yeah. So
do you have, as a pianist, do you have a lot of creative input in terms of like chord changes and things like a lot of people give hip hop a bad rap name. Well, it's not musical, and there's not this and not that, but that's the furthest thing from the truth. You can have a lot of great innovative stuff with harmonies, particularly now in 2020. So as a piano player, do you get a lot of input in that regard?
Yeah, very luckily for me that, the history of the band is based off of jazz records. That, basically a lot of the samples that were used are from jazz records. So it's just like, it doesn't feel at all foreign to me to be able to understand where it can go and say, oh, well, we've been doing it this way. Let's since it's now, I bet we could take this in this step. And I definitely am usually supported. Thad is the musical director. But a lot of times, we're just right in sync. It makes so much sense. It's not a difficult anything going on with that. Yeah.
So you're at Cornish. You graduate from Cornish, and then what happened after Cornish? What's going on?
Let's see. Whoa, 94. I graduate from Cornish, and basically, I really was starting to just had my sights on being a working jazz piano player, and I thought it would take a lot longer. I'm just a kid. I don't know. So, what I thought would take, over 10 years or something, really started to happen after about 2 years of hanging out, making connections, and really having that first network of the people that I went to Cornish with. That's really what I see, because I could have gotten a private instructor and not gone to Cornish and still learned, but it's just that first network of people that you have that are out there in the market doing the same thing, and they know you are, so you get put on. Yeah. So
who were some of your contemporaries at Cornish that you studied with?
Whoa. So wow, that was a long time ago. I worked a lot with Lamar Lofton, bass player. We did a lot of gigs together. Loxar Reese, we did some gigs together before he moved to LA. Lots of gigs with him. Who else from Cornish? Jeff Harper. I got to play with him a lot. Not so early on. Later, not right away, but later in my career, I got hooked up with a friend of mine named Lee Butterfield, who now lives in L.A. We just became close friends and musical compatriots. And who else from that time? That was so a long time ago. I mean, really, let's see. There was a guy. It was Richard Glover, who doesn't live here anymore. I'm not sure where he lives, but another bass player friend of mine. Did a lot of things, and then there were people that would be hanging out at Cornish that weren't, like John Wicks, who drummer. Who does he play for now? He plays for a pretty famous band. I always fits in the tantrums he plays for right now. But yeah, he was very. I played with him a lot. I hired him for lots of gigs. So funny though, some of the people that I played with back then, they've moved. They've moved. Yeah.
Life has a way of doing that to people over time.
Yes,
Could be
yes.
musicians. It kind of like
Exactly.
So okay, when you were going to Cornish, we're kind of like you're done with Cornish. You're still kind of playing around town. What were some of the clubs and venues that you were working? Because I remember the ones that when I was there. I mean, there was Paragon, which is no clubs are around right now, but Paragon, Tula's, Baltic Room, Lo-Fi. I mean, what were some of the places that you were playing at that time?
Late '90s for jazz, it was basically Tula's. That was the jazz venue, and then there was the 700 Club late '90s, which that was kind of a golden age for us. Yeah, that was thank God for that place. There was so much going on. I'm like almost every night there was live music at the 700 Club, and that's where I joined a jam band called Jambalaya, and literally had a gig every Friday for like 6 years, and a lot of places where I met a lot of the people like Thaddeus Turner and Gerald Turner, and Michael Wassman would come and sing, and so many people came through that. I mean, Reggie Watts was also part of that scene, a big part of the scene, almost like a focal part of the scene. Yeah, but so I would say from the 700 Club, then the Baltic Room was right after that, because we moved, because the 700 Club closed, and then we moved Jambalaya to the Baltic Room. So those are the places that were the Tula's, the Baltic Room, 700 Club. I'm trying to think of what other places that we were playing at a lot. For a minute, there was a place in the Central District that we would have a jam session called Sessions. That was actually a little bit before Jambalaya. But it was like an African goods store, that Mansa Musa owned. Yeah.
Was Patty Summers around at the time too, or nah?
Yes. Yep. But I didn't really. They were playing at the market, and I didn't really have a lot of gigs there. Sometimes I would be called to sub. Yeah, I think I played that gig with Patty Summers. Yeah, but early on I didn't play so much there. Yeah. There were some jam sessions. Those places like Laferno's that closed, and Salute was a big place. I played a couple gigs there. For a while, especially with Lamar Lofton, we played a lot at the Seattle Art Museum for like a lot of after hours, like corporate events.
Just duo or?
Yep, duo, and sometimes duo sometimes, but a lot of times with a guitar player. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, we were talking prior to the interview here, and I was telling you about the memory I have of you, where it's just like running a video in my head. It was at a house party here in Tacoma, at Cliff Cologne and Summer Stockinger's house, and you were playing piano, and I did not know that you sang, and you crushed it on piano. You sounded beautiful, and then you sang the melody. So when did singing come into the fold for you?
Well, the thing is, singing seems like that's always been a part, because playing gospel records in the house, we would just be singing in the house or singing at church. So singing was something that I was always doing.
Yeah, but lots of people sing. They're not good at it. You're good at it, in my opinion.
Thanks. That one's more natural. That one's not, that doesn't it feels like it didn't have a beginning, or this defining moment. It was just kind of always there. And I just became more and more into it. Like, okay, I knew I wanted to sing. I knew I wanted to be you know, I was inspired by Stevie Wonder and Prince to be a musician, and then I got into jazz and then took off in that direction. And I always knew that I would be a songwriter and a singer, and I wanted to make sure that I was a musician. That's why, you know, it was great that that piano grabbed a hold of me. So, because I was asked at Cornish, like, well, you should double major. You should do vocals. And I was like, no, I think I'm just going to stick to the pianos. I was learning a lot.
Was Jay Clayton there at the time when you were there?
She was.
Okay. Did you get a chance to hang with her much?
A bit, and sit in some of the classes. And it's not like I didn't take any vocalist classes. I think I took a quarter of like some standards and like started to figure out like what could I sing and what stuff that I like singing in that realm, since most of my singing was about gospel or pop, not really jazz. That was more for my fingers. So I did take some classes and had some, got to sit in and maybe even subbed a couple of times playing some easy stuff for some students with Jay Clayton and Beth Winter. Mm-hmm.
So now, and I've kind of drawn my own conclusions about this, but talking with other musicians about, a lot of musicians are of the opinion you should be able to sing what you play. Now, do you subscribe to that same school? Did you give that any credit, or meh?
I mean, I don't know about should, but I experience it like singing. I experience my playing like singing, and if I was thinking about it, I probably could. I probably do and could sing a lot of what I play. I think a lot of what I play is lyrical. I mean, you go in and out. With instrument, it's definitely can get a little more cerebral than your voice. Yeah, the voice is just so connected to you're already talking, and it's like not. It's more. If you let it be, it can be more heart centered. I feel more heart centered, and your instrument can be that as well, because it can be really cerebral, which is fun to mix those two, because life is not just all heart or all brain. It is a combination of both. So.
Right on. Well, okay, so now I'm curious, 2020, here you are with all of the things that you've learned in music and developed your voice to where it is now. Who are some musicians, or let's go pianists, who are some pianists that you really are looking at and like, wow, I really enjoy their playing?
Right now, or?
Yes.
Well, definitely I really love the work of Robert Glasper, and I love the work of Brad Meldow. I love the work of Jeff Keezer. Some other piano players, but like PJ Morton, who's another keyboard playing singer. That's what I really dig. Those are the ones that stick out right now. Yeah.
There's a question you just reminded me of. When you were particularly Cornish and getting aware of jazz piano and that entire realm and just jazz in general, did you do a fair amount of transcribing or not so much?
I did. I wish I'd done more, but I did a fair amount of transcribing, and or a lot of. I feel like I did, especially as assignments. Like I did a whole long Hank Jones transcription. Of his trio solo, doing Confirmation, and that was really great to do and challenging, but really great to do. And funny, a lot of the transcription that I have done would just be mainly just picking out parts that I like without writing it down. Yeah, and just like, oh, I love that lick, and I'm gonna sit down and make sure that I know how to do that and figure out how does that fit in with other things. So, yeah.
Right on. Okay. Well, in the other interview that I was watching about you, you were talking about. I'm trying to remember how you exactly worded it, but kids today are born, they always know the world as having hip-hop in it, whereas as like us, I'm 42, you're a little bit older,
yes.
we grew up where hip-hop came in after we were alive. You
Yeah.
know? And you were talking about how, again, I'm getting this out of context and not worded correctly, but basically how some musicians like jazz is this, and it has to be this, and that's part of the reason why the audience has died. And I agree with you 100%. And I think the musicians that kind of cultivated and developed this music would want it to incorporate all these other things. That's the great thing about jazz.
Yeah.
And a lot of my personal favorite bands, current, one, he just passed away, Roy Hargrove, because he could play anything from early jazz all the way up to current, or someone like Joshua Redman's band, or Brad Meldau's band or Russell Gunn, any of these types of guys that incorporate everything.
Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit about your opinions on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, my opinions is that music is basically just sounds that humans are making. So, I'm very interested in, as a musician, and being inclusive as I would like all of humanity to be. Like, I just love to see what people are saying. I mean, because for me, music is like a celebration. It's like a celebratory noise that people are making, and it is. I'm very interested in what people are celebrating about being human through music. I mean, it's like I definitely have come from, jazz is, straight ahead jazz is the real music, and these are the real musicians, and then, letting that go, realizing I was limiting myself, and actually that I was being dislikable being that way, unlikable being that way. So the music has taught me a lesson of how to be more human and include more, and I would always encourage including more. I mean, there's just so much you're alive for a specific amount of time, and the things that you're around, that's your world. So investigate it, let it in. That's what I would say.
Well, I think the other thing you were speaking to was audiences for live jazz, and part of the reason that it's kind of died off, or I mean, if you look at statistics, jazz is like 1% of the music world, and part of that reason is because it's in not completely, but in some ways people are like, well, it has to be this, and unless it's this way, we're not gonna program in it, we're not gonna play it, we're not gonna, and so I think that kind of, when you look at artists like Roy Hargrove or like one of the great trios right now, young players that are playing, Emmett Cohen and Kyle Poole and Russell Hall, when you look at them play, it's like they can take it any direction and make it just as current to stuff today as it was like
right.
1940s, 50s, 60s.
Yeah, and I think that has something more to do with the money side of music than the music side of, what you brought up before, that how the audiences are told how to consume, what things are viewed as, and what makes money in the marketplace. Yeah.
Well, and again, there's so many facets to this.
There
You
are.
spend hours going into
Yes.
these rabbit holes, but part of the way that now the jazz is taught in schools, it's very one-sided, very myopic, where it doesn't have to be. But I think part of the problem is maybe a lot of the educators that are doing the educating don't necessarily know or have gone through those things themselves, so they can give it that perspective.
Yeah, and there's no learning materials geared in a different direction. Unfortunately, there's like, I would consider Off the Wall and even Thriller, I would consider that jazz now. Like as a kid I didn't. It was definitely pop, but like as far as arrangements and chord changes, it's like it was Quincy Jones. It was like, that's jazz music. Those are jazz harmonies, like less than pop harmonies. So, but I don't know of a book or some sort of pedagogy that would open your eyes to that. You'd have to be a musician and be like, oh yeah, that's interesting that isn't considered just an extension of jazz, like,
Yeah, there's music academia, and then there's the real world where you need to go out and make a living for yourself.
Indeed, yes, and they butt heads. They butt heads.
All right, well, it's that time. We got about 15 minutes left here, so if anybody has any questions that they'd like answered from Darrius or myself, feel free to, live audience, feel free to chime in, or if there's any questions that you'd like to know online, just feel free to type it in, and we will get to them. If there are no questions, we're just going to continue off our conversation here, so but feel free to jump in, and we'll get to them if we can. Any questions? Not yet, okay. Oh, no, go ahead. What do you got? So the question is, while touring with Digable Planets, are there any very memorable gigs or moments that stand out to you?
There's a lot of them. Okay, so but let's see, really stand out. Okay, so I think for me, playing 3 shows in Russia was a standout, and this was like, I think right before an election. So we got really treated very well. Like, I think they were trying to show off a bit. But we were fed so well, and the accommodations were so great. And I will just always remember that touring experience because I had just never been there. It's funny, the touring experience, that's an interesting question, because what I'm taking as far as what the standout was for me is not something that was musical. It was that so much inside of the U.S., what we're shown, what Russia looks like and how it is, was just not the case. It was like so much like anywhere else. Like it was bright and vibrant. I remember going in thinking gray and industrial, and not that way. It was good to see it myself, and be treated great, and so yeah, that's definitely a standout.
While touring and going to these other countries, do you get the opportunity to get out and play with musicians in clubs and hang out?
Not a lot. In Denmark, I did. In Copenhagen, we ran across a really great Wednesday night jam session that went to like 4 a.m. It was awesome. They had a grand piano in there and everything. It was really amazing, but not a lot. I mean, so much of touring is wham, bam, thank you, man. We're in and out so quick. Like, I mean, sometimes we'll have driven or flown for hours literally and go right to sound check and then have enough time to change the show, and then the show's done at 11 or midnight, and then there's like a 7 a.m.
They never talk to you about this in music school. You do the classes, and then you actually get into like, oh, this is going to be great. Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
There's a lot of it that's work. The shows are fun. The shows are always fun, but everything else is work. It can be work. Yeah, so.
Any other questions? Okay, so moving forward right now, you got a lot of irons in the fire. What are some projects that you're currently working on that you're excited about, and what's going on with you right now?
Yeah, right now I'm getting back into making music, since COVID has definitely had me be in the house and be more grounded. If I could say something that it's a positive from it, it's like I've been a lot grounded and taking stock of what I have and what I can do to continue creating. So I just released a new single on October 19th, and that had been sitting in my hard drive for a long time, and the new album will come December 26th. So, and those dates are kind of important because October 19th was my mom's birthday, and December 26th is my birthday. So I'll just getting more dedicated to creating and putting out music.
Well, I know a lot of musicians know about you in this area, and maybe a lot of viewers that maybe don't. So if they want to know more about you and hear your music, where are some places that they can do that?
Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, Bandcamp. Those are places to go check out music and just kind of see what I'm doing. And really, there's been like a lull since. I mean, I didn't mean for the last album that I put out to be like 2009, 2010, and I have taken this long. I was been creating music this whole time and just never put it out. Maybe partly from being a dad, and who knows, and being on tour, all that stuff. So.
That's what I wanted to ask you about. So we talked about this briefly before too. So you're a full-time musician for the most part, and you're also working a day job, and you've got a daughter who's 12 years old. How do you balance, practicing, playing, being a dad, working, gigging when we're not sheltering in place? How do you deal with all that and stay sane?
Well, you go in and out, up and down. I've definitely had like love-hate relationships with this career and path that I've been on, and like, why did I choose this?
Tell me more. Tell me more.
Yeah, there's no money. Oh my God. He's like, how do I stay positive about this? But I know as I'm getting older, just making sure that I'm having fun in the moment. Like, I try to tell my students, like, if, I do come from a school where it was like I was working really, practicing, and some of it was work, but, I was doing it because that's what I love to do. And I just really getting reconnected and staying connected with that. It's something that I love doing and that's fun, and I definitely impress upon my students that as well. So in the moment, how I balance it is just like what feels good and what honors that I like this, like whether it's what I like about being a dad, what I like about my abilities as a musician, and sometimes it's so easy to focus on where a problem is or where something needs to be corrected or fixed. Lately, I've just really been turning on where I can revel in as much happiness and joy as possible.
What a concept.
Right?
So you're staying off social media is what you're saying.
Sometimes you have to, absolutely, to stay sane, absolutely. So just more joy, more happiness. I even, like I said, impress upon my students, like if you're practicing and you're having a headache, stop. Do it when it's fun. It's called playing music, not stressing music.
Speaking of your students, I think these folks are watching. They said they were going to watch today. Mutual friends of ours, Linda and Michael Wischkowski, and their son Sam, who was one of your students. Were you aware that he and the group that he was working with won a Grammy?
Yes. Well, I don't know.
This is just kudos for your education to get you some more students here.
That's
your
so
students
great.
Are doing great things.
That's so great. Yeah, I didn't realize that they won a Grammy, but yeah, I love their music, and yeah, I had a chance to see Sam play with the group last year for the first time, and as soon as he came off stage, he's like, "Oh my God, it's great that you're here." He's like, "None of this would have been possible without you." Because while at Seattle
Can
Prep,
I get that in writing?
Right? Exactly. Where's my money? I remember he was a multi-instrumentalist in high school, so and he knew who my friend Jake was, and so I was like, "Hey, would you like to meet Jake?" So I had Jake come to the school and meet Sam, and they just hit it off and are still working together today. And in fact, we just recently had there's a rapper from South Africa named Nasty C, who we collaborated and produced a track for him that just came out this year. So that was awesome to have us all three on something out in the world. So
weird to see your students grow up and become like great musicians. You're like, you feel old.
Yes, indeed. I'm definitely an OG.
Yeah. All right. Well, we still got some time. Any questions from the audience or online? Okay, I have questions for you.
Go ahead.
Like we talked about, can I say your age?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm 42. You're 49. We're roughly the same time period growing up. So I'm assuming you enjoy hip hop based on the music that you play. And
absolutely.
So for you, what were some of the groups that you kind of gravitated towards that you really liked? And I want to say in like the 80s and 90s. I don't want to talk about now. I want to talk back in the day.
Well, Run DMC was gigantic. I loved all of them back then. It was such a fun time. I remember in the 80s, UTFO, the Untouchable Forces Organization, I said Run DMC, Africa Bambaataa, there was Kool Moe Dee, which started in the Treacherous 3. There's so many. Like, I would probably start to stretch into the 90s too, when I talk about maybe Big Daddy Kane or BDP and KRS-One and Public Enemy and X-Clan and oh my God, so much.
Listen, for me, it was a lot of NWA, Public Enemy, Tribe Called Quest, and then later The Roots.
Which is kind of 90s-ish.
Yeah. De La Soul.
What people of our age would call the golden age of hip-hop.
I say that all the time, but I get flack from my students.
Exactly.
So the thing is, a lot of them that are getting into music, it's like you want them. It's like, I want you to go back and check this out because they've never listened to it, and they're listening to other stuff. And they're like, yeah, that's great, but have you heard this? And there's just a lot of resistance. It's like, what are you talking about, old man? You don't know what's cool.
Exactly.
It's like, wait a minute.
Exactly.
Have you heard Charlie Parker?
Right.
The thing that kills me is like when I'm working with some of my high school students. So like, do you know who Louis Armstrong is? Nothing. It's fun. Okay. Do you know who Miles Davis is? Nothing.
Wow.
The one that killed me that was most recent, I asked one of my classes, do you know who James Brown is? None of them knew who James Brown was.
Wow.
That was crazy.
Wow.
Crazy. So we're failing as a nation.
Right. Which is so odd. I'm not sure what area you're teaching him, but there were some students that I was shocked that did know, like, because I was expecting them not to know, but it is odd for them not to know, especially today when you could go onto YouTube and have access to them. Like, we didn't have access to we didn't have as much direct access to being able to press a button and hear something from the 30s like they do now, you know. So yeah, we definitely need to just let them know, because they can literally just type it in and experience it. We didn't even have that.
I've seen people talk about this, and it's kind of an interesting conundrum, because I remember I didn't have a lot of affluence growing up, and so we would go to the library and check out a CD and then take it home and copy it, you know, of course, and do things that way. But we couldn't afford it, or we'd go to the music store and open up a real book and write the changes on your hand or something like that, you know.
That's awesome.
But now you've got everything's. You can find all the PDFs online. You have Spotify. You have all this stuff where at the push of the button you have everything.
Yeah.
And there's just like everyone says that they want to do this stuff, but there's a certain level of apathy that goes along with it, and they just don't understand the struggle because everything comes so easily now.
Yes, you're right. Yeah, that goes back to what I was saying before. Like, if you're really hungry, you can find really good stuff, but you do have to search for it. It's not going to hit you in the face. The really, really what I would consider really great stuff. But you know,
I think part of that too. One of the other artists we had on here was talking about, it's kind of like an embarrassment of riches. There's so much stuff, and maybe part of the problem is they just don't know where to begin. A lot of the stuff that I learned about music history or jazz artists was from reading liner notes. And you could see dates and personnel and all that kind of stuff. You can't see that on Spotify, at least without a little bit of effort.
Yes, yeah, you really have to be searching nowadays to get that information, or to know, or to even find that information valuable. Like. Yeah, you almost have to be a music maker to find that valuable, fortunately or unfortunately. But,
any other questions? No? Okay, well, before we wrap up here, are there anything that you could say or impart to anyone that wants to continue on with music, or starting off in music, that you found to be very helpful for you in personal growth, and you think that's important for people to keep in mind as they pursue music as either a passion or a career or any of that?
I say what I was saying before, like, just make sure you're having fun, and that that it's about being creative. It's easy to get your ego caught up in comparing yourself to other players. Just make sure you're having a bunch of fun and being creative and self-expressed. Yeah.
Right on. Well, thank you so much. I know the music we're playing today, I wrote 3 new tunes this week. The music that you wrote is one. You said you wrote it this past year, but the other 2, are they brand new pieces that you did this week, or what's?
No. They're. Let's see. So one of them is called "Your Love," which was on a 2003 record of mine, and then what was it? What I say? "Hand It Over" was another one. That's new from this year, and we're going to be playing it live for the first time ever.
No pressure.
Right, all good. And then I performed another one that I'll sing. I think it's called "Awaking." Yeah, then that's from last year that I started that one.
Well, we're looking forward to it. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to take a brief pause here for about an hour to get the instruments set up and sound checked, and then we'll be starting the performance at 3 o'clock right here on the same page. So feel free to come back and check it out. And thank you so much, Darrius, for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure.